Record. All right. Welcome back, guys. I hope you had a good weekend. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that if you didn't, but the weather was amazing. So now is the time to, if you have outdoor hobbies, now is the time to enjoy this. The only issue right now is that like the weather is at least sometimes really, really nice, but all like the grass is still kind of dead, the trees are still dead, so we need that green to come back. But that'll happen. All right, guys, let's get into it. Welcome back. It's Monday. Mondays are always kind of weird, but Caden's definitely gonna help us all be focused as well as Caitlin and Maddie. We're gonna do a very similar week this week to last week. We're going to finish chapter 16, though. Last week, we kind of like capped off 15 in the middle of the week, which was weird, but it kind of worked out. And now we're going to finish chapter 16. So I'll come around to essays today to pass out the lecciones. I don't have it printed yet, but that seems to work out when I come around to essays. It'll be due Wednesday. Let's do 6 of them. We'll do a story maybe at the end of class, but probably not. But tomorrow I'll hand out the story. It'll be about Achilles. So it's kind of cool. We can talk about Achilles. We talked about heroes a lot, I feel like, these last few weeks. Not few weeks, I should say, like 6 or 7, 8 weeks more like. We'll do Jeopardy on Thursday because, yeah, everyone did good with that. And then we'll do a quiz on Friday. Guys, make sure you're not doing anything to damage school property. A couple of the chairs, something weird happened to them last week. It's not okay at all. I think sometimes there's a disconnect and people think that things at school, it's just like it doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't really matter if it gets messed with. But it's like all of this stuff costs money. It belongs to somebody. I mean, this is my classroom, right? So it's like everything in here is like mine. So don't, I mean, kind of, it's the school's. But don't disfigure. No, actually not. That'd be really horrible. That'd be really bad. I wouldn't sound calm right now. But don't break things and don't cut things in half for no reason. It's kind of like weird. Guys, before we get into Jason in the Argonauts, we're going to talk about Jason in the Argonauts today. Let's run through prepositions. Okay, so get out a sheet of paper and make yourself a little section of notes devoted to prepositions. So Danny and Soraya, in the future, when you run into prepositions while you're doing homework, you can just like flip to a certain page in your notes and say like, oh, they're all right here. Because look how many there are, guys. It's like too many. This is a lot. So what? You don't have to, well, kind of, yes. Like these are all vocabulary words. First warning for Alora. And maybe Connor. I can't really tell. I just hear noise coming from that area. So anyway, write these out in your notes, guys. Go ahead and get some notes out so we can write these out. And it's important that you keep them in their separate columns. So we have this column and this column for a reason. You should write them that way as well. And I'll tell you how to label the columns in a second, Kylie. Yes, you should always come to Latin with your notebook. There's not a day that goes by that we don't get something that counts as notes, something that you are able to write down in your notebook that you should be able to come back to. We should all be building this habit to write notes. Okay, let's see here. Antonio, the Latin word in, how do we translate it? Don't overthink it. Elias? In, right? But there's technically one other way to translate in. What's another way to translate in? Anyone?
Inside.
Nope, not really. It could also be on, okay? And that's when it takes an ablative, okay? So that's what these two different columns are for. The ones on the left, they all take ablative objects. We don't pay that, or we didn't pay that much attention to ablative. But now we technically have these different ablative types that we have to watch for, like the ablative of means that shows up without any prepositions, and the ablative of time when that does the same. So it's probably good for us to kind of stop and think about the ablative a little more. So in, like, say you're doing something in Rome, it would be Roma, and you'd put a macron over the A in Roma to make it ablative, because in that context it'd be the object of in, right? That's what I mean by the object these prepositions take are ablatives. But in can also, it's one of the rare ones that can take an ablative or an accusative. And when it's taking an accusative, it's more like into. Sometimes even kind of like toward. And that's important because in is actually very different than into. weirdly. One of those things you wouldn't necessarily realize until you are learning Latin. What does per mean, Ella? Can you remember what per means? No? That's okay. So it's like, again, we have so many, right? And like we have pro and per and post. So, I mean, some of it, like we have a lot that start with the same letter. Oh, I didn't even put propter. Okay, I'll add propter to the bottom of the accusative. Carson or anybody remember it per?
Or.
No.
I think it was through, within.
So through is the main one. So I'll click through for per. So it's usually taking an accusative on, like, so it's functioning the way it would on this side, because these are the ones that take accusative objects. But it can technically take an ablative, and that's why when it's more like by. So the word percent literally means like per quintum. How much is quintum? What number is that, anyone?
100.
Yeah. Percent means by 100. So you might see it with like a pronoun, like somebody does something by themselves, like a reflexive kind of pronoun. You're gonna Caitlin get something out immediately. You're not just hanging out right now, guys. It's Monday. We're getting back to the groove. It's not always the most pleasant experience to come back from the weekend, but you get into it before you know it. It's Friday again, and you're doing it. And these are the last. Next week is gonna be weird. It's gonna be broken up a little bit with testing. So I think I'll teach you guys a few days, but not that many days. And then what? There's 2 more weeks in April. April is gonna be kind of long, but it's like before you know it, it's May, and then it's like, okay, this is kind of over now. Anyway, yep, by or through, very different things. It's kind of hard. I wish I could think of a way to help you guys remember the through part. The by, like percent being by 100, maybe that helps. Sine, what is sine, Carson? Yeah, that's without. It takes an ablative. Post is after. Okay, we use post all the time in English, so we're working our way through both columns. Whereas cum, David, is the opposite of sine, so it's not without. It's what? It's not without. It's the opposite of without. It's right. Cum is with, right? Whereas anti is before. So look how I'm kind of pairing them. You can draw a circle around these things if you want to say like, oh, these are like antonyms, right? Antonym is a fancy word for opposite. Actually, okay. We usually talk about antonyms as in like dark versus light or something like that. I don't know if prepositions can have antonyms, but it's like with versus without. That should count, right? Those are opposites. Maybe opposites, maybe not. Pro. What does pro mean, Ava? So while she thinks of that, guys, it's important. Like, I think it's good to know the pairings because the pairings actually do take the same kind of object. Like Caleb, Sine, and Cum both take ablatives, whereas post and anti, after and before, both take accusatives. So if you can remember, like, oh, I think post takes accusative, so that must mean anti does too. If you can have that kind of logic, that'll help you. And there's not usually a time when you're like having to be like, what kind of object does this preposition take? Because we don't usually write Latin. Usually what it is that like the preposition is just right next to its object. And it's like, I want you to know that the objects are either ablative or accusative, depending on which one it is. But it's not like the most important thing. Because again, it's like we're not writing Latin ourselves. If we wrote Latin, like letters in Latin, which maybe we should do that a little more. I might consider that over the summer, making that a bigger part of the class. But then we'd have to be like, oh, I'm using the preposition pro. So I have to use ablative as its object, that's accusative. What is pro, anyone? Before. Kind of before, yeah, it can definitely be before, but it's a little more often for or on behalf of. If you want to write before, you can, but it's kind of confusing. Anti is before, usually having to do with time, but pro would be before as in like a positional thing, like I'm standing before the person. So y'all can put before, but I put for and on behalf of. And then inter is between or among. Between or among. I don't know what that's a reference to. Inter, I think, so it can be either of these, and we might know a PUD, which we don't technically have as among, because I talked about a PUD notes among us. We need Dugan and Alora and all that whole zone to chill out. I don't think you guys are getting any thing out of this class right now, and that's a choice you are making, unfortunately. What does sub mean, Danny or Kylie? A submarine, is it on top of the water? It's under, so sub means under. It takes an ablative. Technically, sub's one of the ones that can take an accusative too, but don't worry about that. Like, I've never seen it happen. Oh, and then I saved our worst ones for last time. Connor, you should have some paper out. I can't tell if you do. It might be on your lap. I'm not sure. I saved our 3 froms for the bottom of the ablative column for a reason. X is one of our froms or from out of. But what else has it been showing up? It's been showing up in a certain context recently. Anyone? Been showing up between numbers and ablative. So it can also just be of. When it's with a number. If it's like got a number on one side and then an ablative on the other, that's when you just translate it as of. So you don't have to say like 100 from out of the soldiers. That sounds weird. You would just say 100 of the soldiers, right? So that's one thing with X is that it tends to go with numbers, or it's talking about like coming from a place, like leaving a place. It's usually the kind of the context. Whereas day is from or a very different word than from. Anyone? About, yeah. And like day shows up in French and Spanish as kind of more just like straight up of. It can kind of be of in Latin, but not quite. It can kind of be like concerning or like regarding. But from or about is what the book tells us to kind of focus on for it. And then last but not least is ab, which can be shortened to just aw with like a long, like a macron over the A. I need to type that actually. And that's more like from, away from, as in something's kind of getting separated is usually the context. And then add over here is to or toward. And then I need to do this one real quick. Propter is on account of. And that's all of our prepositions, but that's quite a bit, right? So maybe I'll drill them a little bit this week, and we could see how many we need to make the things go away again. All right, so good. Well, why did that happen? But like, I didn't. It looks fine. People watching the video, I just saw some projector, so 1 second. Oh my gosh. Aiden, what's your favorite preposition? Like X? It sounds cool. It sounds like it's like the letter X, but it's actually a whole word. And do you guys notice these prepositions showing up in English in a certain kind of way, specifically?
Bro, as in a sports player.
I guess that means something kind of different. But guys, the last thing I'll say about this before we move on to Mattia is that hopefully a lot of these are familiar to you because they show up as prefixes in English. A lot of these wholesale show up as prefixes. Things like submarine, subaquatic, or whatever. Expulsion, okay, exile, things like that. Words that start with pro, I guess they're coming from pro. But sometimes I can't necessarily connect that. Percent, that's not really a prefix, but post-war, antebellum for before the Civil War, internet, international, right? Some of them don't. A put, I don't think, shows up anywhere in English. But that's that. I would circle all 3 of these guys. And then before we start talking about Jason and the Argonauts, has anybody thought of a great mnemonic, Connor, for how to remember that add with a D is 2, whereas ab is from anyone? Someone said, what was it, on Friday, someone said add is like, if you're adding something, you're adding something to something. So that's how you can remember add is 2. But yeah, I can just tell a lot of y'all mix these up. But preposition phrases show up in like pretty much every other sentence. So if you can just flip back to your notes, like this section of your notes, and just like label it preposition, so you can like find this again and actually use it, because that's the idea with notes. If you don't take them like Nelius or whoever else, that's an issue. But I guess some people are like, you know what? I know all the prepositions. I just know that I do, so I don't actually need to focus on it. All right, Perseus, we've talked about. Heracles, I want to revisit, honestly, because I feel like we didn't talk about him on his own terms. We talked about him. Yeah, we talked about the Disney movie, maybe a little too much or something. We should talk about the actual Greek hero. Theseus we did last Monday. We'll do Jason today. Very quickly, I'll do Atalanta and Orpheus. Since he kind of counts, we might revisit Orpheus in more depth later. And then, since we're talking about Achilles later this week in translation, we might get to talk about the Trojan War a bit. Carson?
Disney's going a little bit crazy with rebooting. I'm going to predict they're going to reboot Hercules.
Hercules, like a live action reboot.
And now they're just gonna make like a TV show or something.
There already was a TV show. Honestly, a Hercules TV show wouldn't be the worst thing. A live action Hercules sounds really goofy. I hope they don't do that.
No live action.
Yeah.
Live action. Disney, it sucks at making live action.
They do. Okay, final warning for Dugan, Caden, and whoever else in that whole zone. I will break you guys up next time any of y'all are audibly talking over me. I will move you. And if you don't comply, I will email your parents. All right, guys, so who is this guy? He's the hero out of all of them. If we look at all of them, he has the most normal sounding name. Jason doesn't really stand out. I think Heracles, for some reason, that name really kind of sticks in our minds in pop culture nowadays. And a little bit for Theseus and Perseus. But Jason, I don't think people talk about Jason the Argonauts too much. And it might probably be because he has this really normal sounding name, that people still name their sons nowadays. Anyway, that's his name. In the Latin, it'd be like Iason with an I for what that's worth. But he lives in Ioculus, another I word, a city in Thessaly, which is in the north eastern part of Greece. And this is actually the same part of Greece that Achilles will hail from, but Achilles is probably not born yet. This is, if it's set during any time, like a lot of the other Greek heroes, probably around 1500 BCE. So we're talking 3,500 years ago. That's roughly what's supposed to be happening. I'm talking a generation before the Trojan War. So anyway, who is this guy? He's got this uncle named Peleus, who's a power-thirsty warlord. And he is so power thirsty that he has several members of his half-brother's family killed. And his half-brother's name is, no joke, Aeson, just Aeson, which is Jason without a J, which is interesting. And that's Jason's dad. So he has a lot of Jason's family killed in order for this crazy guy to maintain power. But Aeson's wife saved their baby, Jason, who had just been born, by having all of her handmaidens circle around the newborn baby and cry, so that the person, I guess, coming around to kill people for Peleus was oh, this baby was born, it didn't survive the birth. It's really sad. It didn't make it, so we don't have to kill it, which is kind of crazy, right? But that's how Jason's mom saved Jason so that he actually lives. They get out of this situation, and Jason gets brought to Chiron, that we've talked about before, this centaur guy who trains him and also keeps him away from this really toxic, violent situation going on with his evil uncle, Peleus. Danny? Yeah, I almost said
Only with W-H-E. He did that at the end.
where
When crying.
W-H. What word? I don't.
Right before crying, or right after crying.
Right.
The word after
After crying, when
Oh,
was born.
okay. Yeah, all
When?
right. I don't know if that's worth. I don't okay. Sure. Thank you for pointing that out. I'll fix it one day. But right now, because I have to record everything because of COVID and coronavirus, if I clicked out of this, it would take me a full minute to go full screen again. So, but I will try to get that eventually. But anyway, Peleus is crazy. He goes to the Oracle of Delphi, which we should probably talk about the Oracle of Delphi more in depth. This is a real thing that actually existed, that there was this part of Greece, on the eastern side of Greece, called Delphi, where there was an oracle who would commune with gods, notably Apollo, to tell people prophecies. And like I said, this is real. People would actually line up to go to this oracle, and we don't know if it was always a hoax, if the oracle was exposed to some kind of weird geological fumes that were coming up from cracks in the earth, or kind of like they thought it was a spiritual thing, but actually there was this weird element of this biological element of something they were being exposed to that would get them into the state where they would be giving prophecies. But anyway, he goes to an oracle, and the oracle tells him that a dude with one sandal is going to overthrow him, which it's an important detail. It's one of those things that ends up happening, sort of. But yeah, so he gets to go train with Chiron, who later on, Chiron will actually train Achilles. So this guy who, Phil in Danny DeVito's character in the Disney's Hercules, I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be Chiron, but Chiron's not it doesn't have a lot of, as a name, it doesn't sound amazing, I think. So they named him after Philoctetes, another dude who's not a centaur or a satyr. But anyway, he grows up, Jason gets to grow up, and then one day he comes back to Ioculus. I guess the situation with his uncle is simmered down a little bit. and no one knows about Jason. Like they don't think that he's like a dude. They don't think that his mom ever gave birth to anybody who like went on to grow up. And apparently on the way back to the city, he helps this old woman who's like drowning in a river, who turns out to be Hera in disguise, of course. And she like puts a blessing on him. But during the process, he loses a sandal. And then he walks into town with one shoe on, which this is supposed to be showing, but I zoomed way in. I could not actually tell that he had one sandal on. And like, remember Theseus had the weird sandal detail? His dad left sandals on her rock? I don't know what it is about sandals. But he gets to town and everyone's like, oh, like, that's the dude. He's got one sandal. And they tell him about the prophecy, which I guess was public. And he goes to Peleus to be like, hey, I'm going to overthrow you. Like, it turns out I'm the guy. Just want to let you know. And Peleus is like, okay, but if you want to overthrow me, you have to sail on the Black Sea, or like through the Black Sea to this place called Colchis. It's basically Russia. And you have to get this magical item called the Golden Fleece, which you don't know too much about, but it presumably comes from a golden lamb who was slaughtered and what was it called when you take the skin off of an animal? But it's like this magical item he has to get. And shear, maybe?
No, shear?
Because yeah, you don't kill it when you shear it. Yeah, I think this lamb has been skinned and killed probably, which is a shame because it was golden and that sounds really cool. But the king's like, okay, I guess as far as the prophecy goes, you are going to be the one to overthrow me, but I'm not going to like give you the throne willingly. But I will, I guess, if you get this golden fleece from Colchis, which again, that's on this eastern part of the Black Sea. So this is Greece down here. Like we kind of know some of these areas we've talked about throughout the year. It's worth mentioning the Roman Empire will not really ever mess with Russia too much. It's kind of like far flung. I mean, they go a long time without messing too much with Gaul, which is France, kind of. Julius Caesar, like if Julius Caesar hadn't conquered Gaul, who knows what it would have happened. But anyway, it's just Russia and China are like kind of like the Roman Empire doesn't really make it there. There's a little more engagement with those kind of people when Rome gets relocated to Byzantium here, aka Constantinople, towards the end of the Western Empire. But anyway, I just think it's kind of weird that that's where Jason is going. So he has to assemble a crew of people called the Argonauts, which is named after the ship they use called the Argo, because it's really far away. I mean, for one thing, they're in Thessaly. It's around Macedonia, where Alexander the Great and Achilles will come from. They have to sail up here through these like straits that are probably very narrow, and then there's all sorts of weird islands that they're gonna encounter and stop at along the way to get all the way over here.
Why doesn't seem that dangerous?
Doesn't seem that dangerous? Okay. Well, what other naval journeys do we know, Connor, from Greek mythology? What are some other?
Cyclops.
The Cyclops, which is who, Kylie? Yeah, the really big one is Odysseus, who fights a war around here in Troy, and then has to sail all the way around Greece just to get back to Ithaca. Then he gets way blown off course. He ends up in Sicily, some other places that are like way closer to Italy than he was ever supposed to be. And then what's another big one? One that's surely written way after Jason is written about. Theseus, he goes to Crete, but no one makes a big deal of Theseus going to Crete. Because I mean, look how close that is. He just has to like pop on down from Athens. And we talked about Odyssey, Odysseus, but Aeneas, the Aeneas leaves Troy as well, and he has to go all the way to Italy. He goes to Carthage for a little while, he goes to Italy. But that is a story that's going to be talked about after the time that Jason is spoken about. Because Jason is kind of as ancient as Perseus and Heracles. So he assembles his crew called the Argonauts. The ship, we don't necessarily always have the best details on how the ship kind of comes into existence, but it seems to be blessed by the gods, created by Athena, possibly named after the term Argives, which is what Homer uses to describe the Greeks. Homer never really actually uses the word the Greeks in his poems, weirdly, even though he kind of like conceives the idea of what Greece is by all the place names that he drops and sprinkles throughout the poems. But in some versions, they actually talk about this being the very first boat that ever sailed, which I must have never got to the bottom of. When I came across that detail, I was like, when was the first boat invented? Do we know? It would have been Bronze Age, so I don't think we would know. We can only probably guess, which is really crazy. But like, there's no Stone Age boats, right? Are there Stone Age boats? I will find out, guys. I'm gonna try.
Sink. That's clearly a liar.
I'm gonna try to find out. Okay, so who are the Argonauts? It's not gonna mean that much to you guys because we still have to talk about a couple of these people. But it's basically a little Justice League type setup where it's a lot of different notable people joining together. I'm not sure why they're all so gung ho about helping this dude Jason, who in some versions is written about as though he's the first kind of reluctant hero, that he's kind of like hesitant, that he's not as bold as Odysseus and Aeneas. That he's kind of like, he's a little younger, he's not quite sure of himself. He doesn't have quite as much help as someone like Perseus, who I feel like Perseus is always helped by the gods or stuff of the way. I guess Theseus is pretty self-reliant. But yeah, Jason is he's just kind of like this guy. He's like a normal guy, and he might be kind of young. Heracles, in most versions, joins up with his friend, who might be one of their friend. Orpheus is the greatest musician of all time, and he joins up. We'll talk about Orpheus at the end of this. Atalanta, who's one of the only female heroes, joins them. We'll talk about her a little bit at the end. She's like somewhat minor, but she's kind of important. Philoctetes, the guy who I was saying, I'm pretty sure this dude is based on, even though he's not actually a satyr. He joins. He's a famed archer who will go on to fight in the Trojan War. So he must be very young here, and he's older during that time. And then these two guys, just called the Boreads, who are like winged demigods, children of a wind god. So they're over here in this picture, apparently. So it's a good time. And I don't know, they make this painting makes it look like
Why do all these famous people during this random guy? Because like they're not getting anything out of them. Yeah, I want to go get a golden fleece. Can you guys help me? And you'll get nothing out of it.
I guess the term is picaresque, like or like chivalric. Like it's just people like, hey, like I want to go on a quest. Like, oh, there's a fetch quest to do. Sure, we'll join up. Let's like form a party. And they just like wanted to have an adventure with this kid who was basically giving them an excuse. Like, hey, I need to go to get the golden fleece so I can claim my rightful throne and kick this kind of bloodthirsty king out of his position. And I'm enlisting some heroes, and a bunch of heroes show up. Jake?
It's like me and my friends when we play D&D, every side quest we see, we're like, yes, let's play that.
Yeah.
Before we get to the main campaign.
It is.
There's more side quests than we've actually played the campaign.
Sometimes, if a game is good side quests, or if it's just good in general, you just want to do all the extra stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's like an archetype, right? What do I mean by archetype? That's a word for like, it's a model for something. This is like one of the first, because this is a story that's over 3,000 years old.
Is that one flying?
You need to, don't interrupt me, guys. But this is like the first, like it's a 3,000 plus year old example of like a group of heroes banding together, which is obviously like still a huge theme. Obviously, when you think of like kind of dumb Hollywood stuff like the Marvel movies and the Justice League movies, it's not flying. I was already going to address that. I don't know why it looks like it's flying. I think it's just like the surf of this like water. It looks really white, so it looks like the sky. So they kind of, just like Odysseus, they have all these stops on their way. Their first one is the Isle of Lemnos, which is this island of only women. They killed all the men that lived on the island a long time ago, and they just get kind of distracted there. Nothing super notable happens necessarily. They go to this guy who's called Phineas, like the Disney cartoon that I never watched. And Phineas is like this cursed king who is plagued by these harpies who always bother him.
Terraria?
And so Jason and his heroes kill the harpies, and so they're kind of like stopping on their way and like helping people out, or they're just like having weird encounters, which is, again, that's exactly what will happen in Odyssey, which is presumably a story created a little bit after this one. Some of these heroes like Heracles and Jason, we have reason to believe they're older in terms of like when they were created, when they kind of come about, than some of the Trojan War heroes. Kylie?
So you said that they killed them, but how do they keep their population?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't, and there's also like the Amazonians. We might want to do a feature on the Amazonians so I can talk about them, because that's like people know about the Amazonians. That's in pop culture, but it doesn't really show up too much in Greek mythology. And yeah, I don't know if the best known poetic rendition of Jason and the Argonauts, I don't know if they address that question, that the women are eventually just going to die off, or if they have to like kidnap women or something like that. I should look into that though, because that's a good question. Connor?
How do the harpies look?
I guess I didn't get a picture. I thought I had harpies later. I think I have sirens later. But harpies are just like winged, like witchy women kind
Do
of.
they look like the ones from Terraria?
Maybe. Okay, so just like Odysseus does anybody know Odysseus' version of crushing rocks? I don't know quite how to say some Symplegades are these clashing rocks that apparently would kind of like collide. And so basically they just like rush through it because it seems to be like it's a timed thing. And so that's similar to what episode in Odyssey? Anyone? It's kind of like Scylla and Charybdis a little bit, which is this giant like whirlpool thing that Odysseus has to sail next to, and there's also a squid on the other side, like a squid monster. But anyway, they get to Colchis, and Jason immediately meets and falls in love with, or eventually does, with Medea, who is the princess of Colchis. Her father, Aeetes, is the guy who possesses the golden fleece. And Medea, maybe she likes Jason, with or without some magic spell. But in most versions, Aphrodite puts a spell on her to fall in love with Jason because the gods are helping Jason at this point. And so it might not totally be like just Medea who is the one deciding to help Jason, but she does help Jason. And so Jason has these different tasks when he gets to Colchis. The first one is to yoke these bulls that breathe fire. Okay, apparently that's a thing in Colchis. What do I mean by yoke, anyone? I don't mean like egg yolk. Ella?
Like put something on their neck so that you can hold them as they like walk.
Yeah, I think you can like kind of make it, not necessarily maybe, but yeah, it's like a thing that goes over their necks, and you just like attach the bulls to it, and then usually it's attached to like a plow, and that's how you could like plow a field in ancient times before you have a tractor. And it's a challenge. It's almost like a agrarian type. It's like a farming challenge. Like it makes me picture like a reality TV show where it's like farming, but it's competitive. Because it's just like these yoking bulls, but they happen to breathe fire. So it's just like a weird twist on something that ancient Greeks probably actually had to do all the time. Yes?
I still want to know why they even want that bull breathing fire on their grass. I mean, wouldn't you just burn it all?
I mean, it seems like it. Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's true. I don't know. But anyway, he's given Medea, his new girlfriend, who's also kind of a witch. She studies magic. It seems like it's just a part of her culture that she has magic, and this is way before the time that anyone will think of burning witches. That's not really a thing yet. It'll become a thing hundreds and hundreds of years later. But she gives him some ointment to put on his body so the burns don't bother him, and he's able to do this first task. His second task is even trippier. He has to sow some dragon teeth into the ground, which everyone knows when you sow dragon teeth into the ground, they turn into soldiers that attack you. That sounds really random, but that's a thing that shows up in Greek mythology like at least twice. There's a dude who's kind of like the Greek version of Noah in the Ark, who has to throw dragon teeth over his shoulder so that they can turn into people that'll become his like the first children of man. But anyway, Jason has to do this to fight these people, and so they all gonna sprout out of the ground. This is a funny movie version of it where they're skeletons. And the way he beats them is he just throws a rock into the middle of them, and so they all start attacking each other. It's just kind of like he somehow outsmarts them because they're like zombie drones that are.
I want no. I want the rock. No.
Right, something like that. Where I guess what they think the rock is like they're getting attacked or something, so they just start like swinging at each other. It sort of makes sense. And then his final task, Caitlin and anybody else, is that he has to fight a dragon that is presumably probably bigger than this. Wouldn't it be weird if like a big bad dragon was kind of just the size of a large dog? So it depends on what the version we're looking at. It looks a little cooler here. But even this is like a touch anticlimactic. He, again, uses something that his new witch girlfriend has given him, which is some ointment or a potion that he can kind of pour on the dragon, and it just falls asleep. And so he puts the dragon to sleep. He doesn't even like kill it, which I guess is good for the dragon. And then he retrieves the golden fleece, which is like he earns. Don't ever do that again. It's not funny at all. This is a medieval tapestry. So some of this, all the art I'm using is obviously from different eras. But this is like, it's probably like a 500-600-year-old tapestry that's supposed to show a lot of different episodes of the Argonautica, which is sometimes what this whole story is referred to as. I can't quite make out like, it's a little hard for me to determine. I would need like a big caption that says like, over here, this is happening. Because not all of it is necessarily clear. I haven't read the Argonautica. I should. But a guy living 2,300 years ago who lived in Alexandria, which was basically a really hip college town that just happened to be set up by Alexander the Great, he wrote the definitive version of this called the Argonautica, and that's like the best known version of this. But anyway, he returns to Aeoculus with the golden fleece. He also leaves with Medea, who's like in love with him. And Medea's dad is not happy about this. His dad, it seems like he's okay with giving the golden fleece away. He's like, hey, you earned it. You sow the dragon teeth, you kill those dudes to put the dragon to sleep. But you're not taking my daughter. there's a weird little detail where Medea and her brother apparently is with them. Medea goes and chops up her brother and puts his body parts in the water as a way of slowing down her pursuing father's boat. Because like her father's like chasing them back to Greece. And so Medea's like, oh, I got this. Don't worry. Like, let me do this horrible
Let me just
thing.
sacrifice you real fast.
yeah.
Really
Really
it's
weird-
alright. He'll
really-
kill you anyway.
Yeah, weird detail. There's a lot of weird, violent details in Greek mythology. But they do get back eventually. They encounter some sirens, as you can see here. So they had harpies on the way there, sirens on the way back, which of course are these people who bother Odysseus too and his men. And so Orpheus, stop, just like raise your hand, guys. So Orpheus plays his lyre over the sirens so that the men aren't like lured off the boat to their deaths. Connor?
What do the sirens do?
They sing until you're attracted enough to the sound of their singing that you just kind of like walk towards them and become like some zombie basically.
You're supposed to fall in love.
Yeah, and then they probably eat you, but like you think you're in love with them. So this is probably actually of Odysseus's men encountering them. They tie Odysseus to like the mast, or to whatever that is, the sail post thing, and they like put stuff in his ears, and I guess they would have to do that too in most versions. But Orpheus for the Argonauts, he just plays music really loudly over it, and that does the trick. They fight a bronze giant who I cannot find a good picture of, who throws rocks at them, called Talos. Again, Medea uses some magic, and then they get back. They get back to Eoculus. Jason has his new witch girlfriend revitalize his dad, who is aging. She then tricks Peleus, who is the bad uncle, remember. Medea, is kind of like really
Killing.
savage. She tricks King Peleus' daughters into killing Peleus. So that is something I would probably stop to fix, because that makes no sense. But it's this really weird episode where she's like, oh yeah, if like he's sick with something, there's this weird trick where you just like stab him a bunch of times and he'll feel better. And so Peleus' daughters are like, okay, we'll do that. And like they just like accidentally kill their dad because Medea tricked them. But also like if they're stupid enough to go with that, that's probably part of the issue. But they're just like, oh, she's a witch, like she knows what to do. What, Connor?
You know, there's this really weird trick where if you chop up your brother, it'll slow down a boat.
That's what it. I'm not. Some of these details probably sound made up. I'm not making them up, guys. They're in Ovid's Metamorphoses on bookshelf. It's real. So he does a lot of takes on this too. But anyway, in Corinth, because they get exiled after this happens, they're like, y'all need to leave. So Jason does not assume his role as king of Eoculus, which was kind of the whole point to begin with. They have to get out because Medea got Peleus' daughters to kill Peleus. So they go to Corinth, which is where Oedipus Rex happens, probably a little after this time. Jason falls in love with Creusa, who's his princess. Medea gets really mad. She's already had 2 kids with Jason. So she kills Creusa's parents.
Okay,
And then she also, trigger warning, infanticide. She kind of like kills her kids that she had with Jason as a way of getting back at him. And this is really insane, right? This is really violent. So at that point, you're like, okay,
she did on me.
Medea's like kind of crazy.
Kinda.
And this was one of the more gruesome and also more popular Greek tragedies, right? I think we talked a little bit about Greeks. They like to call plays, especially tragedies. And the ones that like the most were like the most messed up ones, where characters did things that were just completely unheard of, like accidentally marrying your mom or killing your kids.
Hold on, what?
Oedipus Rex. Oedipus Rex is on the curriculum. You guys will read it in the 9th grade. This dude accidentally does it. It's a long story, but just like it's things that are super taboo. Like it's the most taboo things. Those are what you make Greek tragedies out of. Like Agamemnon getting killed by his wife when he returned from the Trojan War, only for his wife to then get killed by their kids. Those are the kind of things that ancient Greeks loved because it was so intense that there's no way you could sit through this play and not feel something and have this like emotional reaction. It's like, oh, I would never do the crazy things these characters are doing on the stage, but I get to watch it from a distance, and I get to like feel the crazy emotions of that kind of thing.
Well,
But anyway,
actually had a motivation to kill her.
Yeah, so Medea just burns everything down, and then she leaves at this point, and this is when she goes to Athens to try to hit on Theseus's dad, and she eventually tries to kill Theseus, right? So that's when I brought up Medea last week when we were talking about Theseus. So Jason is kind of done with his journey now. Nathan, stop wrinkling papers. Just chill out. We're almost done. Dugan, chill out.
Yeah, Medea's obviously just like
But no, yeah, that's the last we hear of Medea. After that, after Theseus' dad finds out it's his son, she leaves and we don't hear from her again. But yeah, so like now Theseus is about to start his journey. Jason just ended his. Hercules is obviously doing stuff, and Orpheus is doing stuff if they're part of the Argonauts. So now it looks like Theseus is like a little younger than those guys, maybe, and people like Achilles are even younger than that. So there is kind of a timeline to the Greek heroes that we talk about. What is this for? Jason comes back. Oh, he's already looked at this. What, Connor?
That's the one witch you like actually want to burn.
Maybe. She seems really cool when she's younger, and then there's like an evil version of her that seems kind of different. But you can also think of it as vengeful, and there's like something to her vengefulness. Apparently, they explain it as she also thought that if Jason ended up with this Creusa woman who was a princess, that her kids would be thrown into slavery or something. So there's some weird logic, but it's like that doesn't justify slavery. It's probably better than not being alive. One of the other Argonauts was Atalanta. She's kind of worth talking about because she's unique in that she's not a dude. She's kind of like a human version of Diana, or Artemis is the Greek name for the goddess of the hunt, sister of Apollo, twin sister, who kind of eschews men and like society in general, and has a bunch of priestesses who hang out with her. I'm talking about Diana right now. She has like a lot of priestesses who accompany her in the wilderness, and they just like kind of don't mess with dudes or society in general. They're just like, oh, we're good. We like animals and like hunting animals and like nature. And Atalanta rather, is kind of a manifestation of that. There's this big boar, Caledonian boar. There's a boar hunt that a lot of semi-important kind of C-list heroes help with, including Atalanta. And then, like I said, she's one of the Argonauts. So her and Orpheus, who I'll talk about as well, are people who help out with that. She has this race with this guy, Hippomenes, who gets a guy to help him like win her over. He's a grandson of Neptune. So he gets special apples that he like throws down in front of her to distract her because she's faster than everybody, and she says like, "Oh, I'm not going to marry anybody unless you can beat me at a race." And Hippomenes is like in love with her, so he's like, "I'll figure out how to do this." And so in some versions they end up happily ever after, and yeah, maybe she actually has a good ending as a hero. Ella?
I read the version where the apples were from Aphrodite, and he forgot to like give her like a tribute back. So then later on, like after they were already married, she turned them both into lions because he forgot to give her apples back.
Okay, so yeah, okay, that's a good detail. That completely contradicts me saying that they live happily ever after. Yeah, okay, that does sound. So he doesn't like return the favor for Aphrodite, and so they get turned into lions. They both of them. So actually, no, she does not have a good ending. Thank you for reminding me, Ella. I don't know if anybody does. Maybe Perseus. Maybe Percy Jackson's mom was right. It's just Perseus. That's it. Jake?
Atalanta just sounds like a really Walmart version.
Yeah, because we just think of Atlanta, and so it just sounds kind of like someone like almost mispronouncing that word or something.
Sounds like there's a VeggieTales version. Wait, seriously?
Real quick thing about Orpheus, guys. Last one, but this is like I don't know what like Atalanta would. We talked about this before. I guess she'd be the Wonder Woman of the Justice League, but she's kind of more like Black Canary, if you know who that is. Because I feel like Diana / Artemis is Wonder Woman basically. Atalanta might be a second heroine, but Orpheus, I don't know what he's not Martian Manhunter, but he's not like good with a sword or anything. He's really good at music, but it comes in handy in terms of getting past the sirens.
Who's that DC villain that made
Who's a what?
There was like a DC villain that fought Batman that
Oh,
had music abilities.
I don't know who that is, but I'm sure that exists. I'm sure there's like somebody from the 50s who's like that. This is the greatest musician of the Bronze Age. He was well renowned all over Greece as this like the bard. He's the son of Calliope, who is a muse. There's 9 muses in ancient Greece, or Greek mythology, who like inspire different things. Calliope is the goddess of music. So epic poets and musicians kind of pray to her. This is a real dude insofar as like there was cults surrounding Orpheus. I don't mean real as like there was probably never an actual guy named Orpheus, but there were religious cults. Okay, Caden, y'all can't sit next to each other, okay? It's really annoying. Y'all are worse than like any of the back row people who sometimes talk. But anyway, he is so good at music that when he plays his lyre, that's like his instrument, rocks will kind of float around him. Like that's what we're told about him. That his music is so good, even inanimate objects respond to it. And so he has a girlfriend, Eurydice, who gets bit by vipers, and she dies prematurely. So he goes to the underworld. He's able to soothe Cerberus to sleep to get into the underworld. And then he plays music for Persephone and Hades. And they're like, you know what, dude, your music is so good. We will let you like save your girlfriend's life. And this, I think, is what the Hercules scene at the end is kind of based on. And they're like, okay, but you have to lead her out, and you can't turn around to check on her. You have to walk in front of her out of the underworld, and you can't turn around to look at her until you're completely out of the underworld. I'm not sure what it's a metaphor for, but it's almost saying like trust in somebody, like and don't like you just have to trust that they're there, and you can't like look at them necessarily all the time. Because he chickens out, and he like checks on her before they're fully out of the underworld, and she's just like sucked back into the underworld, and he's so mad that he just like rocks out until he gets killed by a bunch of people who worship Dionysus, the god of like wine and revelry. And trigger warning, these are actually pictures of like some women finding his head floating in a river. Sorry, I don't know. There's so much weird, violent details to these myths today. This is a woman just like, oh, it's that really famous musician's head. He like rocked out so hard that these women ripped him apart. But yeah, that's the thing for people who worship Dionysus. We know for sure people actually worship Orpheus, and he had cults. He had like religious followings. But people also did that to Dionysus, who's the god of like partying and kind of losing your mind. So Dionysus would have women followers who would kind of like go into a frenzy state to the point where sometimes they would like murder someone without fully realizing it. So sorry for the weird amount of violence this morning, guys. Jake?
I see it, I follow. He started playing so much music that just random people started ripping him apart.
I think he was.
Real death of Eddie Van Halen.
He might have been consecrating Dionysus himself, like playing the song for like he's like everything stinks, but like Dionysus is still the truth, man. And then like a group of Dionysus's fans, like super fans, they just like happen to come up and like lose their mind. I don't know if it was because of their music, and some versions probably is because of their music. Like his music was so awesome that they're just like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna like rip you apart. You know how that goes.
Nobody rocks.
But yeah, so now we filled in a little bit of the details about the people in the Argonauts. It's not just Jason. That's what, because I think he's just a guy, so it helps that there's other dudes and heroes and ladies with Atalanta who are joining him to kind of make him seem more interesting than Jason actually is. Connor?
So two things. Number one, wasn't his music super good that attracted animals too?
Yeah, like in this picture, that's probably a reason all the animals are around him. I know about the rocks and like trees with like shake and stuff, but animals were into it too.
Second one, I mean like going by Terraria, he's in total useless because the magical music harp can hit people in Terraria, so he's probably not super useless.
Well, bards that's like a role playing character type in like Dungeons and Dragons and Final Fantasy games. They're usually people who can play music and like make their party members stronger, or they can give them attribute bonuses. And so bards are actually sweet. They just like make everyone better. Lucio, if you played Overwatch, Lucio is a bard. Basically, he's like a kind of like cyberpunk bard, but that's fine.
Cyberpunk 2077 bard.
I know how to heal. I'm a sick Lucio, and I've booped like 3 people off the edge like multiple times before it's Lucio.
Cyberjump
It is so fun.
2077 never works on your console.
I can actually jump off a cliff as Lucio, and then I can skate my way back. With the place with the pagodas, like the Japanese pagodas, if I run up to that bridge, I can just like, it's so good. Don't play Overwatch, guys. It's too addictive. What, Jake?
Yeah, first of all, Overwatch because it's my great thing. It's a game
No.
I think it's like the best game, but it's like too good. I can't. If I ever play it again, I get addicted. I like to beat games. I don't want to play a game I can never beat. Guys, chill out.
In this team campaign that me and my friend started, I actually made a bard character. I've never played a bard. It's confusing. They're very strange. I'm used to playing like I had more attack types or
Sure.
so I was playing a Kenku bard, and it was so strange. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's different if you're used to just like
I was
dealing damage.
Kenku, a little crow bird person who's only 3 feet tall,
Interesting.
with saxophone.
Oh, you got a
That's my
saxophone.
character.
No, you'll get more and more spells. Bards are sweet, guys. Watch my cousin's video, Joe Cat, on bards and like what they're like in
Joe
D&D.
Cat.
Yeah.
Is he like YouTuber?
He's like a famous YouTuber. He's like 5 years younger than me, but he's like really famous on YouTube and he makes videos about D&D. But bards are good, guys. Play as bards. They're awesome. They're actually the best. No, I think they're really cool. Guys, it occurred to me yesterday, so we had that, no, Friday, when we had that math equation at Final Factile, I realized a lot of us still don't know the numbers. And I think it's a combination of things. When we went over them, that week was quarantine, so not everyone's like really good at focusing on videos and watching them. If you had Miss Smith last year, you probably actually are pretty good with the numbers. I think she talked about numbers a good bit. I haven't talked about numbers though. So if you're like not good at watching videos and you didn't have Miss Smith last year, then you probably still don't know your numbers. But Unis is 1, Primus is 1st. What is 2 and 2nd? John, Connor, Soraya, or Aiden?
What?
What's the number? What's 2 in Latin? I'm just asking those 4.
Unus plus unus.
Starts with a D. It is Unus plus Unus.
Duos?
Yeah, duo. And what is 2nd? Anyone out loud? Don't overthink it. Secundus. Yeah, very good, Danny. What is 3 and 3rd in Latin? Caden, Dugan, Alora, Caitlin. What is 3 in Latin? Yeah, so it's just Trey actually. So I like leave off the S because when I say trace, it doesn't sound like a Latin word to me. So I'm just gonna assume that somehow that's like a very soft S that's almost not there. To say 3rd though, tertius, tertia, tertium. And we do have a word in English. You have primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors, which I don't know what they are, but I guess like weird like middle shades. Oh, I skipped this one. I meant to ask somebody. Quatuor, kind of a more awkward one. But quartus, quarta, quartum looks like the word like quart. Like a quart is a fourth of a gallon in English. What is 5, Ava, Kylie, Natalie, or Jake? It also starts with a QU. Yeah, quinquel. What is ordinal for 5th? Yeah, good. Quintus, Carson at least remembered. Quintus, quinta, quintum. Then we have basically just sounds like 6 and sextus. Okay, for 6. Connor, calm down. What is 7? What is 7? Anyone?
Is that pet or?
Septim and Septimus. So this is notable because the month September is the 9th month. So if you can just think of the months as being pushed back by 2, because January and February were added later. 8 is the easiest one. It's what, anyone? Octo and octavus. Octavus. What is 9? Anyone? Novem, like November. Nonus for 9th. Am I talking over even a little bit of noise? Like, why am I just like letting that happen? It's really annoying back there. This group, like, the whole kind of corner. Decim, decimus. Not just December, but we get words like decibel, which is a 10th of a bell. I didn't know that was a measure of sound, a bell, but a decibel is a 10th of that. When people say decimate, that literally means to reduce by 10%. And I talked about in the video how apparently if Roman soldiers like acted out or misbehaved or tried to do a mutiny that failed, they would draw lots and literally kill a 10th of them. Like a 10th of the soldiers' names would be drawn from a hat, basically, and they would be killed as punishment. All right, guys, that's basically it. I will bring the homework around. I'm gonna bring the homework around to essay today. Genji's? She seems hard to use. Or who else? Who else did you say? Oh yeah, Hanzo. That dude's kind of scary.